Hello, and welcome to the Author's Den podcast, where we help authors share their message to the world. Join us as we feature unique conversations and get ready to be inspired. Now, let's get started with the show.
And now welcome the amazing Lizzie T.
Hello, and welcome everyone. How are you doing? Welcome, good afternoon, good evening, good morning in this beautiful world. How are you? I am so excited today and really ecstatic to be able to speak to another author here at the Author's Den. We are so excited because there is so much culture, so much novelty, so much experience all over this beautiful world that we cannot stop, or we cannot allowing everybody to know wonderful people, wonderful authors, wonderful stories that are coming through us here on the Author's Den. I am one of the hosts of the Author's Den podcast, but there is many, and there are such a privilege and honor to be able to speak to incredible people from all over the world. And today, guys, is not going to be the exception. All the way for Austin, Texas, I have an incredible young lady that is going to be with us, sharing a little bit of their story, a little bit of their expertise, a little bit of the things that are been going through, and obviously a book needed to be written. So yeah, we're going to be speaking today, everyone, so you know, to Mary Lou. Mary Lou has an incredible memoir, War Ready in a Father's Shadow. It was published by Universe. A young American girl wrestled with challenges of military, constantly on the move during the Cold War. Through her 14 moves in 10 years, that's a lot to move, frequent travel and exposed to historical places that Darst saw in the world in different ways than her parents. Darst says that it was inspired to share her story with the discovery of her father's in World War II, during after his death, which helped her to finally understand him. And that's incredible. I can identify with Mary Lou, because after everything my father went through, and not through wars, but just moves different places in the world, we were able to understand him a lot better. She has launched her new marketing push to her book, and which it takes place in many places in the world, but I do not want to give it away, because this is really definitely a teaser for you to get an idea, for you to get want to go to her website, or to go to wherever we're going to find out wherever we can get the book. I assume that it's probably in Amazon. The war again. The book is called War Ready. But yeah, let's meet this incredible lady, her story, her passion, and her wanting to continue to leave a legacy, right? Her father left her a legacy, and she's continuing on for others to see it, to hear, and to discover her stories. And this is going to be incredible. I am so excited and so surprised, and I can't wait to hear her speak today. So let's get ready. Awesome. Let's welcome her with a wonderful round of applause. Yeah. Mary Lou, love your name. Welcome to the Author's Den. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. I'm so flattered and honored to be part of your program. I'm very flattered and very honored. So I'm happy to talk to you today. You're very kind, and I appreciate you very much.
I love your soft-spoken voice, and definitely there's a lot more to this soft-spoken person. Lots went through. I mean, you've moved so many times. before we get started into the nitty gritty, right? The book, the essence of this interview. Writing, was it always part of your life to do journal always, or came on later on in life when you decided, you know what, my father has an amazing story. I don't want it to live with him, to die with him. I want it to continue on, like I said earlier, a legacy. What writing, where does it writing become part of you?
Well, I did, write growing up in school and in college. It's easier for me to write than it is to talk, so I guess that was one reason. And I discovered my father's diary after both of my parents had passed away in the bottom dresser drawer of his dresser. And I was astonished when I read it. And so parts of it are quoted in the book War Ready. But it opened my eyes to a person I didn't know, who was my father. I hadn't known that side of him he wrote about. And so I would encourage everybody to just find some time to write sometimes. Write whenever you can.
That's an awesome suggestion. I was just going to ask that. Usually I ask at the end of the show, but yeah, you're a little bit ahead of me here, but that's incredible. One of the things that I love what you said is that you discovered your dad's journal, your dad's diary after a while. Incredible. That is a big surprise. I did not know that. What did it feel like? All of a sudden, you're going through his things, you're going through, the things that he's left, and here you are with a book, with a notebook, and it's all about his life. What did it feel like? Oh, am I going to find things that I don't want to know, or were you excited to know that this is my dad's life? Well, what did it feel like?
I was astonished, to be quite honest. My brother and I were going through the house together, and we were looking through his things together, and looked at his diary or journal. We're just astonished because he never talked about the war. He was in World War II and in Korea. He never talked about any of his experiences in the war. I don't think men from that generation who'd been in war, I don't think any of them did any talking about it. But it was good to find a written record of his memories of that time. That was good. But it was.
Of course,
go ahead,
it is.
Please.
Yeah, Mary Lou, I am so shocked. This is such a good way of starting this conversation. I hate calling an interview because this is an amazing conversation, but what a surprise, that you and your brother walk in and you start going through. And I assume because I've known a lot of people that have fought, even including Afghanistan later and many other places, and people have written books. But it is definitely one of the hardest things is to talk about experiences that people went through in the war. Absolutely. And back then, even more so, to be able to share horrific incidents and trauma and things like that. Those things did not get talked. I assume once he was done or once he was released, it was not a topic of conversation on the table or even discuss that with yourself. So you were able, was there any surprises, things that you did not expect? And obviously we're going to talk a little bit about it in the book, that you didn't know about your dad, and all of a sudden reading his diaries, you were like, OMG, what did Dad just do? Or there were things that just...
Well, the travel he did during the war, he was during the war, but he traveled to Scotland and Wales, and then he was sent to Paris and returned. We never knew any of this about his travels during the war, and the trip over was on a freighter, and he was, I think 6 other ships followed the ship he was on with other men, full of soldiers going to the war, followed it all the way across the Atlantic until they harbored in England. He loved being in England. He loved the food, the people. It was beautiful. It was different, of course, than being in the war. And so that was new. And it was all new. It was a different story than we knew.
Yes,
from our
yes.
father.
Finally, you see another side of your dad that you had no idea that he was, and especially when he's expressing himself with the food that he tasted and things that he got to see. So absolutely, you saw it in a different light. So what was it like, Mary Lou, for you to be able to know so many places? Because you've gone to Japan, Germany, and I know myself traveling too all over being a child, I wasn't able to make long-term relationship with friends because every time I did that, my father just, time to move, right? And so I didn't want to get hurt. That was my experience. I didn't want to have a relationship because we're going to move right away. So how was it for you in that sense?
Well, you described my feelings perfectly with what you just said. I never had lifelong friends because we moved all the time, and so sometimes it was very hard to move someplace where everyone had grown up together. Their parents had grown up together. They all went to the same church, and their mother shopped in the same places. So it was sometimes very hard to make yourself become a friend in a new situation like that. The other people didn't need friends. I'm the one that needed a friend, but they had friends and they didn't need an extra. But it worked out. I learned a lot about how to get along with people, and it worked out. I did have friends. Yeah. You
had to learn, and you had to kind of self-protect so your feelings and your self-esteem, all those things wouldn't get hurt. That's one of the things that I had to learn myself as well.
Sure.
But on the other hand, you probably experienced things that many other children, many other kids, and many other people would not be able to experience, like knowing the culture in Japan, and then knowing the culture and food and things in Germany. What would you say is one of the best favorite place? I don't think there is such a thing as best, but what are your favorite places that you got to experience for a little longer, and what are your favorite foods that you tried in different parts of the world?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, the memory that has never left me and probably will never leave me is the time we lived in Japan from 1952 to 1954. That was 7 years after the war, and we were not totally accepted. I mean, we lived in Nara, which is on the east coast of Japan, and many people in Nara had not seen American children, and so we were kind of, I don't want to say oddballs, but we stood out so much. We were taller and larger than the Japanese people, and we learned to speak some Japanese. We had Japanese in school, and that was very helpful. Yeah, the parents, it was a small American community, and the parents wanted us to know the culture of Japan, so they paid for a Japanese tutor. So we did learn some Japanese, and that was helpful for my parents when we went places. But and I was a wonderful young girl who was our maid, Hatsue Imari, and she wanted us to call her Hatsu, so we did. And she was like a big sister to me and a daughter to my mother. She was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And the funny thing, no, it's not funny, but I have to back up a little bit to tell you the whole picture. When we left for Japan, we lived in Houston with my mother's parents, and my aunts and uncles and my mother's cousins came to the train station to see us off. And there were so many tears and so much crying and red faces. I was 9 or 10 years old at the time, and I thought, well, maybe we're not coming back. Everybody's so sad. Well, we went to San Francisco and got on a ship and went to Japan, then so forth. And then at the end of that period, 2 years later, we got on the train to ride to Tokyo so we could get on a ship and return to the States. And little Hatsi had come to the station to see us off. And I have never seen anyone cry like that. She was just physically spent. Her face was so red she couldn't stand up straight. She kept reaching out for the train car, knocking on the train car we were in, and the electric train just made a jerk, and then it slowly started. She was left in the middle of the station that no one would go around her. No one would get near her because she was so upset. It was a terrible, terrible way to end. Terrible way to say goodbye. It was awful.
It's incredible how you describe it, Mary Lou, because I am living it right now. I can see your friend's face, and I can imagine myself being right now in that train station. I love the way you explain it. I love the way you portrayed your story. That's incredible. That's incredible. I'm not sure if that's on the book, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. Are you able to speak a little bit or understand Japanese nowadays?
Well, I didn't hear it again after we left. And so without hearing it, it faded away. I mean, I could say, arigato gozaimasu, thank you, sayonara, goodbye. Those are words you read here in the movies, and anything that... Absolutely.
It's like in anything. You don't practice as much, and then, you start forgetting it. But I'm pretty sure that if you get immersed again with Japanese, that might come. Any favorite meals or food or desserts that you've, from many places that you've traveled, that you like, that you will love to try it again? Maybe it feels different once you are back in the States, but maybe when you were living there, everything has a different smell, a different taste, a different everything.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's a kind of a contradiction. My parents were very careful about where we went and what were not allowed to eat that wasn't cooked at home, because everyone doesn't like Americans, and they were not happy that we were there. And so it would have been easy for someone to feed us food that was, would have made us sick or something like that. And so for military people, it was not really a lot of people.
Not a good idea. Okay,
no.
So your parents were very careful. Yeah, they were very careful, and I completely understand. This is incredible. I had no idea that I was going to get into such a deep feelings and experience what you went through as a child. That's incredible. So let's talk a little bit about your book. So what you're telling me right now, I'm not sure if it's part of the book, but what other than you finding the note, the diary from your father, anything else inspire you to write this amazing book?
Well, thank you for asking again. I went to take a writing class at when I was living in Galveston, and a teaching friend of mine, this wonderful teaching friend, was teaching this writing class, and she was on to me for 3 years. She said, Mary Lou, you've got to do this. And I thought, I don't want to go sit and listen to old people talk about their stories. Why do I want? Well, I went one time, and there weren't any old people in the class. But the people who were there wrote the most incredible stories of their lives. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So that's all it took. I didn't miss one class after the first one. And so that was the beginning of the book. I wrote all those stories. And then after I finished the class, I wrote more at home. So that's kind of how it started. I wanted my grandsons to know about my life growing up, and that's why I wrote what I did.
And I think
Hello? Are you there?
I think leaving a legacy and leaving the story of your father and pass it on to family and friends and absolutely it's one of the greatest things that we can do for our family members and for our friends and definitely our next generation. I think what you're doing is incredible. I am glad that your reading instructor was or the course that you took was so inspirational to you, because that will definitely give me a way of, a lot of us take courses and we identify with something that happened there, but not everyone can say, I want to continue this. You were so inspired by other stories that you thought that your story was just as good and definitely maybe even more deserving. So I'm glad that you've listened, that you like what you saw, and that is incredible. That is incredible. I'm looking at the cover of the book, War Ready in My Father's Shadow. I see two pictures by Mary Lou Darst of a little girl and a little boy. I assume this is you and your brother. Love the cover. How was your experience in writing this finally? Because one of the things is for us to kind of put our thoughts in paper or computer or a typewriter, whatever it is. But the other thing is actually going through the process, and that could be very challenging. How was it for you? I have too many questions. I'm so sorry, Mary Lou. But let's talk about the picture that I see right now on the web of a little boy and a little girl. Is that you?
That's a picture of me when I was about 7 or 8, and my brother when he was 3 or 4. We were living in Richmond, Virginia. There's an engineering school there, and my father was sent to school there. And I'm telling you a long story. From there, he was sent to Japan, and we moved to Houston to live with my grandparents while he was away. And then I've already told you about how we got there and we left. But my mother took that picture, and it's in the book.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's for me. Thank you, darling. Thank you so much.
It's so beautiful. It's adorable. I mean, anybody who looks at the cover, they will completely fall in love with this, because you want to just dig right in and find out, what is this all about? What happened? What can I get out of it? And that's really what I wanted to ask. People looking at this, and they're going to grab this book regardless, just because they see, a boy and a little boy and a little girl together, and you say War Ready. Like that's a very, very strong title.
Really?
What do you think what do you think readers will get from your story?
Well, I hope they'll get something about how military families lived and how they live now. We always had to be ready to move, we always had to be on alert, so to speak, when we lived in foreign countries, to be aware that everyone doesn't like Americans, or everyone isn't glad that we're there. And so kind of live on the edge a little bit when you travel in military. And on the other hand, we met wonderful people. And we lived in Munich for almost 3 years, longest place we'd ever lived anywhere. And I'm still friends. I still correspond with the German family that were so kind to us. They were like relatives.
Wow.
And we have been to see. Oh, it's wonderful to know people like that. And then she cooked wonderful food, and her daughter has been to see us, and they're wonderful people. But my grandmother was of German heritage, and
okay.
So I guess that was part of that too. Anyway,
yes, you were able to relive
a long answer.
Yeah, you were able to relive, where your grandmother came from, and how does she immigrated to the States, and you see a little bit more of the culture, the past culture, and your second generation. That's incredible, and great to social media. I was just gonna say, when you lived in Japan and you lost your nanny, or which it wasn't really your nanny, it was like your best friend. Nowadays, with social media, you're able to keep in touch a little bit more, even if you do live in the same place. But that's not the case now. Back then, it was like the pen and paper. And I'm glad you're still friends with your friends in Germany. That's incredible. Before I forget, I wanted to ask you, people that know you as, the daughter of a military person, and now going through having your own children and having your own life, and I assume you're retired, and now you're publishing a book at your very young age. I'm not sure how old you are, but that's okay. That's irrelevant. But what is the feedback that you get from family, friends, people that even on your workshop that you're finally published, and that you're doing interviews all over the world, here in Canada and the States? What is the feedback that you get from people?
Well, people have been very accepting, very interested, and anxious to read the book and know about it. I've been surprised, frankly, that of the interest from people in the book, in the story. So it's been rewarding for me somehow.
Awesome.
That's the best I can describe it.
That is the greatest feedback ever, because sometimes people don't believe in us, or they think this is, we're too young or too old or too whatever. Nobody's gonna, but it is that you put in all the naysayers beside, and you are actually doing what you think is right, and especially sharing with the world your story, your life. And I can guarantee you that there is a lot of people that are going through the same thing, families that are moving with their military families, parents rather, and they have to go through similar things that what you have to go through. Where can people, before we forget, where can people find your book?
It's on the Barnes & Noble website, and I think Amazon website.
That is correct. And so for you guys who are listening and this, we will have a link for you to be able to go straight to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and get this copy, this amazing story, this amazing copy of Mary Lou. The book's name is War Ready, In My Father's Shadow. The price is incredible. You could have it in Kindle. You could have it as a hardcover. You could have it just as a paperback as well. So Kindle, hardcover, and paperback. And one of the biggest links, or one of the biggest website, which is Amazon and Barnes & Noble, which is incredible. And obviously, if you get it, make sure you write your review. And if you hear here on the Author's Den also mentioned it, that you've heard it, that you were intrigued, that you were curious, that you know somebody that will love to read this, please mention it, because that's really what it makes the writer keep going, writing a sequel, writing another story. I believe that we all have a story inside of us, and she did allude to that earlier. We were talking about what else is there, or how can people should people do this, and she was saying that everybody should write a story. Is there anything new coming up, Mary Lou, with you? Perhaps a sequel to this, perhaps a second story? Now that you got the taste of it, you probably think, I can do this again.
Well, to be honest, a lot of emotion that was not expressed growing up, I was able to express by writing this book. It was healing for me in a lot of ways to look back at my past, how we'd moved, the people we'd met, and so that I would be happy for anyone to try to write something about their life, their past. It was very healing for me to write this book, very healing. And, military life is not like life living in the same neighborhood with the same people that you see all the time. So it was healing to go back and look at it and write about it.
Absolutely. And I can see how I can hear in your voice how important this was to you. And I'm glad that you're sharing with that you're being vulnerable right now to say that it was healing, because a lot of us who go through some sort of trauma or some sort of issues in our life, there's never closure sometimes. Closure is very important for a lot of us. So the fact that you were able to have closure and be able to read this and write this and go through the process, and that is definitely like therapy. Some of us go through, see a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist, and some of us write about it. And obviously, I'm able to see this in Mary Lou, that this was a way of therapeutical way of getting the closure, healing things and feelings and perhaps trauma that she wasn't able to understand when she was young. Now she's able to close the door and say, you know what my father had to go through or what we had to go through, it was definitely worth it, made me grow, maybe be a better person, and here I am to tell the story. So absolutely. And if there is anyone out there that would like to have that experience again or would like to feel what it's like to write something that went through your mind, please listen to Mary Lou and do it. What's the worst thing that can happen? You get published, and that is the worst thing that could happen. Right, Mary Lou?
Yes, darling.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry?
Absolutely. And that's what I was saying. That's the worst thing that it could happen is that you get published, and that's not too bad.
No,
that is
not.
That is not too bad.
That's not too bad.
I love our conversation. Guys, please check it out on Amazon. The book's name, I'll repeat it again, War Ready, in My Father's Shadow. It is in Kindle, hardcover, or paperback, and you can order for a friend, for a family member, or for anyone that you think that will be interested in getting a little bit more about this amazing lady's story. Mary Lou, we're starting to come to the end of our conversation here, but is there anything else that you would like to leave us with, or anything else that you would like to say to the audience that is listening to us today?
Well, I'm going to tell you two very short stories that I didn't say. When we lived in Japan, my father took us to Hiroshima to see the destruction there, and we had a horrible experience. And when we lived in Munich, he took us to Dachau to see the death camp there. Those were learning experiences, believe me. There were lots of learning experiences, but those are unforgettable. And I will never forget those experiences. And I hope that the world will never experience anything like that ever again.
I
Thank
understand.
you, darling. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. Thank you. And this has been incredible. Just staying on the line, I'll be right back. wow. You could hear in her voice. You could hear this is painful. I need to applaud you for the courage and the guts to say this. And words, wherever they are, they're not good for anybody. Not good for children. Not good for people. Not good for anybody. So, one of the things that we really pray for, and I know it sounds cheesy or it sounds, world peace. That's what we're praying for. And you could hear from a lady that lived it with her family that this is very painful still. Nobody deserves world in this world. I'm leaving you with that. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much for coming here to the Author's Den. Please, please check this book out. We're Ready in My Father's Shadow. It's an incredible story, and I know that you will benefit from. Thank you, everyone. Have an amazing day. God bless, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to another exciting episode of the Author's Den podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show so you don't miss any of our future episodes. That's all for now. We'll see you next time.